Sawadee. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom. 1 second, Viphav. Like my sound is not on. Hello, testing. Oh, it is on. Sawadee. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the original words of the Buddha. We're in volume 12. We're in the book titled Lowly Arts. And we're going to be exploring chapters 51 through 64 today. Typically, we study about 10 chapters, but since we're coming to the end of this book and there's a few extra chapters beyond 60, we're just going to make sure that we have the opportunity to explore all of those. So welcome to the class today. I'm pleased that you're here, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. The way that we do this program is that I invite students who are in Zoom to be able to read the chapters. Then after someone has read the chapter, then I will share some teachings on that. And then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you guys have. Whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you'll be able to ask questions by putting that into the comment section of Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or you can, in Zoom, raise your hand electronically and ask any and all questions that you like that way. So if there's someone who would like to volunteer to read, you're more than welcome to. Looks like Viphav has volunteered, so go ahead, sir.
Chapter 51, Household Practitioners. When one sees one's wrongdoing as a wrongdoing, make apologies for it in accordance with the teachings. An example of King Ajatasattu, who killed his own father. In that I, for the sake of the throne, deprived my father, wrongdoing overcame me, fortunate one, foolish, having done wrong and wicked as I was. In that I, for the sake of the throne, deprived my father, that good man and just king, of his life. May the perfectly enlightened one accept my confession of my evil and wholesome deed, that I may restrain myself in the future. Indeed, sir, wrongdoing overcame you when you deprived your father, that good man and just king of his life. But since you have acknowledged the wrongdoing and confessed to it as right, we will accept it. For he who acknowledges his wrongdoing as such and confesses it for betterment in the future will grow in the noble discipline.
Okay, thank you, Viphav. This is the first discourse of this chapter. There's actually multiple discourses here. So here, this is an individual who killed his father in order to become the king. His father would have been the previous king, and then by him killing this individual, then he would then be able to become the king. And he realizes now that that was unwise, but obviously you can't go back and change that. That's a decision that he made, and now he's beyond that. But coming to terms with it, going to the Buddha and helping the Buddha or sharing with the Buddha that he had killed his father, this is what the Buddha here, we're translating it to be confession, that he's confessed this wrongdoing or this unwise decision. And the reason why the Buddha is teaching to do this, because you'll see other discourses where he advises you that when you make unwise decisions, to go to either your teacher or a senior member of the community and confess your unwise decision. The reason why he's doing this is so that you can gain wisdom in order to be able to improve that for the future. Remember, everything on the path to enlightenment is all about the cultivation of wisdom. If you did something that was unwise and you didn't put yourself in a situation where you could learn from that, then you're just going to be repeating that same decision over and over and over again, continuing to experience unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. So sometimes when people see this word confession, if they grew up in a Catholic background or in Catholicism, they might have a lot of trouble with that, because typically what they're being taught to do is go confess their sins to a priest, and then they're getting a punishment for that, and then they're going off and doing some kind of penance, right? And this isn't what the Buddha is teaching here. He doesn't punish you. He's just helping you to cultivate wisdom. You see here that he didn't even, say anything other than just, okay, you've confessed this sin for your own betterment, for your own future, and you'll make growth in this discipline by choosing to do so. It wasn't that, he's degrading this person or judging this person or looking down on this person at all whatsoever. Just acknowledging like, okay, you've shared that. And now, if we go back and look, I haven't gone back and looked, but I bet if we went back and looked, the Buddha probably gave some more guidance after this to be able to help this individual. If it was documented in the Pali Canon or not, I don't know at this point, but I'm sure the Buddha gave some additional guidance here, because The thing that would have made this individual interested to kill his father is craving, anger, and ignorance, the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots. Surely there were some cravings, desires, attachments that this prince who was destined to become a king had, and the parent wasn't meeting those cravings and expectations. Maybe there was a craving to become a king, perhaps, and this individual decided to kill his father, and that was the ill will and anger and hatred that he had towards his father. And then this is coming from his ignorance, right? So the Buddha would have helped this individual to be able to understand how to eliminate this craving, anger, and ignorance. And it's important to keep in mind that it's helpful to have nothing but gratitude, appreciation, and respect for our parents. Whether you agreed with the things that they did in your life or not is a whole separate question, right? Because obviously you're not going to agree with everything your family did. Even if you were, let's just say, physically abused or sexually abused at any time in your childhood, and now if you're an adult and you're past that, it doesn't mean you have to have a relationship with your parents, but at least your mind needs to get to the point where you're not holding on to any anger or bitterness or hostility, resentment towards your family. That if you can just get to a point where you have appreciation for this life that you're experiencing, and that it was your mother and your father that provided you the ability to be able to have this life, that is important, right? Again, I've never met any child that has ever agreed with 100% of everything their parents have ever done. But remember, you can separate the choices and decisions that your parents make from the person themselves. You can love the person, meaning you have a genuine interest in seeing them be well, while still disagreeing with their choices and decisions. So one of the worst things you could do in terms of generating unwholesome karma is to kill your parents or a parent like they did here. And that isn't something that anybody should be interested in doing, but it does happen. And it's all coming from craving, anger, and ignorance. And the point of this discourse is to be able to help you see that when you do something that's unwise, it's helpful to go to a teacher or a senior member of the community and share that so that you can get advice. And this will help you to improve by cultivating wisdom and making better decisions in the future. So let me know if you guys have any questions here on this particular chapter or this discourse. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to skip through some of these because we have a lot of content to be able to cover today, and we're not going to have time to read every chapter and every discourse. So here, if you guys have read this on your own and you have questions, you're more than welcome to let me know. This is how to behave towards monks. There's an outcast of a household practitioner that the Buddha is teaching you here. And now here's a brilliant of a household practitioner. We can read this one and I'll talk about this one a bit. Is there someone who would like to read this? Or Vibhav, since you are reading this chapter, would you like to read that one?
Sure.
Okay, great.
A brilliant of a household practitioner. Monks possessing 5 qualities. A household practitioner is a brilliant household practitioner, a gem of a household practitioner, a fine flower of a household practitioner. What 5? 1. He is endowed with confidence. 2. He is virtuous, practicing moral conduct. 3. He is not superstitious and does not believe in auspicious signs, understanding karma. 4. He does not seek outside here for a person worthy of offerings. And 5. He first does meritorious deeds here. Possessing these 5 qualities, a household practitioner is a brilliant household practitioner, a gem of a household practitioner, a fine flower of a household practitioner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here the Buddha is helping you to be able to see 5 qualities that it's important to practice as you're making your way to enlightenment. And he's calling this individual a brilliant of a household practitioner, or a gem, or a fine flower. The first one he talks about endowed with confidence. Whenever you see the Buddha talking about confidence, he's talking about confidence in him, his teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. That's going to help you eliminate doubt. That's one of the fetters. And in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to eliminate this second fetter, which is called doubt. This is where you doubt the Buddha, you doubt his teachings, the community that you're part of, your teacher, and or your own ability to get to enlightenment. And it's common for people to have doubt when they come to the path to enlightenment. And if you have doubt, that's fine. That's where you are now. But you can actually harness this doubt by turning it into an inquisitive mind. That, sure, you could say you doubt these teachings, or you doubt the Buddha, or you doubt the community that you're part of, or you doubt your teacher, or maybe you doubt your own ability to get to enlightenment. So what you do is you harness this by rolling up the sleeves and you investigate and examine the teachings. That's how you eliminate doubt about the teachings, is not through blind belief or faith, but through learning, examining, and investigating the teachings, through reflecting on them to independently verify them and practice them. This is what's going to lead to the cultivation of confidence in the mind. And then you're going to need to improve your moral conduct. And if you have virtuous moral conduct, this is a brilliant of a household practitioner, because as long as you're out there producing harm through your moral conduct, that harm is just going to come back to you, and it's going to ripple throughout the world. So the Buddha teaches that improved moral conduct so that you can get to enlightenment and you're not experiencing these unwholesome results coming back to you. Here, he's talking about a household practitioner who is not superstitious and does not believe in auspicious signs, right? Because if you have that, then the mind is having these wrong observances, which is that third fetter, wrong behavior and observances. Whereas if somebody doesn't understand the natural law of karma, then they're out there with this lack of wisdom. Maybe they're doing ceremonies and rituals and worshiping things and, thinking that the moon and the stars and the planets are aligning, and somehow that's either causing wonderful things for you or not causing wonderful things for you, and unwholesome things are happening. Well, that's because someone doesn't understand karma. So the Buddha teaches, of course, the natural law of karma. That's what you're awakening to as part of this path to enlightenment. When we talk about awakening or cultivating wisdom, it's about the natural law of karma. But if you're having superstition, or you think of things in an auspicious way, the mind doesn't understand that. So the Buddha encourages you to cultivate this wisdom of the natural law of karma, because that's what's going to lead to your awakening to enlightenment. And then he says he does not seek outside of here for a person worthy of offerings, right? During the lifetime of the Buddha, there were many people that were teaching. It wasn't just him. So there was household practitioners that could have been supporting other practitioners or other teachers besides the Buddha. Now remember, the Buddha was a prince destined to become a king. He didn't go into sharing his teachings in order to become rich or wealthy. In fact, he didn't even accept currency like gold or silver. He only accepted food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. But what he's talking about here is that if somebody understands the teachings well enough, and they've learned and explored the teachings of the Buddha, and they see the improvement to the condition of the mind in their life, then they know it's these teachings that are leading to an improved way of life, an improved mind. But if somebody doesn't know that, they would then potentially be making offerings to other practitioners. But if you understand the teachings of the Buddha, you can see that other disciplines, other teachings aren't actually leading to enlightenment. And you would find it very challenging to ever support those kind of teachings with any kind of offerings of food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or nowadays teachers accept financial support to be able to pay for the things that they need. So by choosing to not seek a person outside of his community for offerings, the Buddha is calling this a brilliant household practitioner, because they've penetrated the teachings to a certain degree that they understand the wisdom in the teachings, and they're experiencing the benefit to the condition of the mind. And then he talks about he first does meritorious deeds here, again, for the same reasons, because in this community of the teachings of the Buddha, people would know that these individuals are practicing closely. And it's not just that they're practicing or calling themselves Buddhist, or they're wearing white clothes and shaving their hair. It's not just that they're, wearing robes or anything like this. You need to be able to look with discernment at an individual's moral conduct. You need to be able to look at the wisdom that they have related to the teachings. You need to be able to look to see, are they able to speak about the teachings with ease? Because if somebody has a polluted mind, that means that they're not actually practicing the teachings very closely. And with a polluted mind, they will stumble over their speech regularly. They will have difficulties talking about the teachings. When they are asked questions, they won't be able to go into detail about the answers to those questions. They will really struggle and have challenges in sharing those teachings. There might even be some bitterness or harshness or hostility or other negative things that are happening like this, unwholesome emotions and things like this that are coming to the surface while they're actually teaching. So you would like to be able to look for practitioners and teachers who are practicing the teachings closely, because by you supporting that, that allows the teachings to continue in the world. So let me know if you guys have questions here about these 5 qualities that the Buddha is talking about are developed for a household practitioner to really make their way closer and closer to enlightenment. And the Buddha is calling this individual a brilliant of a household practitioner. Okay, it looks like Mayu Lee has a question here on Facebook. She says, teacher, killing your parent is one of the grave acts. Would that mean that the individual would have to exhaust his unwholesome karma in hell first before he can get to enlightenment, given that he is reborn in heaven or human realm? Is that correct, sir? The Buddha never says exactly what would happen based on one particular act, because it's not about one particular act that is going to lead to any one particular result. You can see places where the Buddha kind of generally talks about kind of a correlation between specific moral conduct and results after death. But what determines what you're going to experience after death is the condition of your mind at death. So if you killed somebody, let's just say you killed your parents at the age of 20, but then as you grew up, maybe you found these teachings, you trained your mind. Maybe by the time you're 30, 40, 50 years old, you've actually gotten to enlightenment. So you could actually potentially experience enlightenment in this very life, even having killed your parents. I don't suggest anyone go out and kill their parents, but if someone has done that, it doesn't mean that they're automatically doomed to hell or any other realm. It means that, yes, they have an extensive amount of unwholesome karma, because now the people who are actually most vested in your interests to be able to become a better and better person, your parents, you've now just taken them out of the world. And now you're basically here alone without those people that are really vying for you to help you become a better and better person. So, of course, there's other unwholesome karma associated with that too, like the guilt and shame and fear within one's own mind, and your reputation is damaged and all these other things. There's countless unwholesome results. But what the Buddha talks about in terms of a grave act, he talks about it as bringing immediate results, right? Because the immediate result that you're experiencing through killing your parents is that you don't have somebody in the world that is, deeply invested in your success and your growth and your development, because that's usually what parents have as part of their interest in seeing you grow and develop into a better and better person. So these grave acts, they bring immediate results, meaning that it's not karma that you're going to experience, 10 years from now. There's going to be karma immediately that you're experiencing because of those acts. But yes, there is also karma that you'll experience later as well, but you're going to start experiencing that unwholesome karma right away. Whereas if, let's just say that you went to a store and you stole something, and let's just say that when you left the store, they didn't catch you, right? So stealing doesn't bring immediate results. You're not getting immediate karma as a result, because you could get away with having stolen that thing for maybe 3 months, 6 months, a year, who knows how long. But eventually, all this karma of stealing will catch up with the individual. But those 5 grave acts, you're going to get immediate results from that. And then, of course, there's going to be results afterwards as well. But it's all about the condition of the mind at the time of death that determines what's going to happen next. And as someone who's done any particular grave act or any other particular act, it doesn't mean that their mind's going to be having that same level of pollution at the time of death that they did when they performed that act. So it's not just about the act itself, it's about the pollutions that exist in the mind at the time of death. Okay, looks like Chris has a question here. Chris is saying, what are some modern examples of auspicious signs? Would stuff like astrology be included? Yes. That's exactly what that is like someone thinks like, oh, there was a plague. So that means that, I don't know. I don't know what people think, because I don't dive into this kind of stuff, right? But yeah, horoscopes, astrology, following planets, sprinkling water on you, and somehow that's going to do something beneficial, tying strings on your wrist. People do all kinds of things. Maybe like now, since we just said Halloween, right? Like, oh, I saw a black cat. That means I'm going to have something bad happen to me. Or I broke a mirror. So therefore, I'm going to experience bad luck for 7 years. Some people say that, right? So people dive into this good luck, bad luck, destiny, fate, things like that. And it's based on these superstitious things that based on certain things that happen, like breaking a mirror. Why would you get 7 years of bad luck? There's no such thing as good luck or bad luck, but hey, you just damaged a material possession. That's essentially what you're going to experience there. And if you get cut or something like this, but it's not going to affect you for 7 years, right? That's not what is going to occur. But people oftentimes have these superstitious and auspicious thoughts. There was a time actually where I broke a mirror intentionally because I was interested to test that to see, what would happen, right? And it's not actually true, of course. So a person who's got superstition or auspicious thoughts and ideas in their mind, they're not going to understand the natural law of karma, that everything that you experience is coming from decisions that you're making, either wisely or unwisely. They're going to instead come up with all these other reasons why they're experiencing any particular thing that's wholesome or any particular thing that's unwholesome. And there's all kinds of different beliefs and thoughts around superstition and auspicious stuff. But you can actually get to the truth where you can see the natural law of karma as being true. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So if you guys have any questions on any of these other discourses that the Buddha is having here in this particular chapter, there's several that are being shared. And you're welcome to ask questions about any of these that you like, because if you were reading before class or preparing for the class, you might have read some of these and you have questions. You're more than welcome to ask questions. I, of course, down here have put my help to be able to help you and guide you. So you can see this is pretty extensive here of what I've actually shared for each of these chapters. I've written several pages about each individual chapter. So perhaps you found your answer here, but if you haven't found your answer and you have a question, you're more than welcome to ask that. Just let me know. So I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have any questions before we move on to chapter 52. Okay, I don't see any questions on any of those discourses. So would somebody like to read chapter 52? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Mutual support between monks, Brahmins, and householders. Monks, Brahmins, and householders are very helpful to you. They provide you with the requisites of robes, amphors, lodgings, and medicines in time of sickness. And you, monks, are very helpful to Brahmins and householders, as you teach them the teachings that are good in the beginning, the middle, and the end, with the correct meaning and wording, and you proclaim the spiritual life in its fulfillment and complete purity. Thus, monks, this spiritual life is lived with mutual support for the purpose of crossing the flood and making a complete end of discontentness. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You guys probably have already been exposed to this discourse in previous classes. If you've attended the Foundation and the Path to Enlightenment course, or you've heard me talk the discourse about merit, what is merit? I usually talk about this one here. So I'm not going to talk about this one too much because I think most of you guys have learned this with me before. But essentially what the Buddha is talking about is this mutual support between Brahmin and householders. And I'm assuming here that you already know what a Brahmin is because you've probably learned that with me before. But if you need help to understand any aspect of this particular discourse, just let me know. Because remember, we have about 14 chapters to cover tonight. And I would just like to be sure that we have time to do that. So the Buddha is just talking about this mutual support between the ordained practitioners and teachers and people who are living the household life and even Brahmin, because that's how the teachings come into the world, is through this mutual support. And without that, the path to enlightenment would be lost, because there needs to be people who basically step away from society and no longer indulge in worldly affairs like having a job, having a career, all those kinds of things. Instead, they really focus on developing their own mind and cultivating as much wisdom about the path to enlightenment as they can. And that's a full-time job. So they need to be able to step away from those responsibilities of having a career and a business and all those other things, so that they can then develop their own wisdom and train their own mind. And then they provide that wisdom to household practitioners. And now as you receive that guidance, then that's going to help you improve your life. And now you might get to a point where you would like to support people who are sharing the teachings to be able to help you in your journey to enlightenment. And this is how the teachings continue to be shared in the world, and so that people can make a complete end of discontentedness, actually getting to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom to ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions there. So we'll move to chapter 53. Is there someone who would like to read chapter 53? This is called the unobtainable. Okay, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
The unobtainable. Monks, there are these 5 situations that are unobtainable by an ascetic or a Brahmin, by a heavenly being, Mara or Brahma, God, or by anyone in the world. What 5? 1. May what is subject to old age not grow old. This is a situation that is unobtainable by an ascetic or a Brahmin, by a heavenly being, Mara or Brahma, God, or by anyone in the world. 2. May what is subject to illness not fall ill. This is a situation that is unobtainable by an ascetic or a Brahmin, by a heavenly being, Mara or Brahma, or by anyone in the world. 3. May what is subject to death not die. This is a situation that is unobtainable by an ascetic or a Brahmin, by a heavenly being, Mara or Brahma, or anyone in the world. 4. May what is subject to destruction not be destroyed. This is a situation that is unobtainable by an ascetic or a Brahmin, by a heavenly being, Mara or Brahma, or by anyone in the world. 5. May what is subject to loss not be lost. This is a situation that is unobtainable by an ascetic or a Brahmin, by a heavenly being, Mara or Brahma, or by anyone in the world.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. We're just going to stop there, even though there's more to the discourse. Again, just out of time. What this is describing is 5 things that are unobtainable. No matter how enlightened you are or what type of being you are, you wouldn't be able to obtain this. So an ascetic, a Brahmin, a heavenly being, Mara, or this being of God, you wouldn't be able to obtain where you're no longer experiencing aging, where you're no longer experiencing illness or death or destruction or loss. You will still experience all of these things, even when you're enlightened. But the difference is that in unenlightened state, you'll be grumpy and irritable and frustrated and angry and having all kinds of other emotions about these things when they're happening, whether it's aging, sickness, death, destruction, or loss of material possessions. An unenlightened being is going to experience all kinds of frustration and agitation because they're not comfortable with impermanence. Their mind is craving permanence. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind has no longer any craving for permanence. You understand that all 5 of these things are due to impermanence. That's why you can't eliminate them. That's why you can't escape this. As long as you're alive, no matter how enlightened you are, you will still experience these 5 things. And this is helpful for you to know, because as you go through life and you might be trying to figure out whether you're enlightened or not, you might still experience this illness or this destruction or loss, right? What's going to determine whether you're enlightened or not is not about the outside world and the things that are happening around you in the outside world. It's about the condition of your mind. Is your mind peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy? Are you still experiencing conditioned feelings? And you would see for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years that you're no longer experiencing any conditioned feelings. Now, the one thing about the outside world that you'll see with enlightened beings is they will have harmonious relationships with the people around them. They won't have bitterness and harshness and hostility with the people around them. Their relationships will be harmonious. That's one of the things in the outside world. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean that everybody loves that person. It doesn't mean that everybody can get along with that person. That enlightened being can get along with everybody and anybody, but it doesn't mean that everybody's going to get along with that enlightened being, right? So make sure you understand the difference between all the relationships are harmonious versus everybody being harmonious when they're around an enlightened being. There can still be anger and disgruntledness and frustration. Like you probably have heard the stories of people trying to kill the Buddha. There was two individuals that I know of that were trying to kill the Buddha while he was alive, right? So if you're looking at the outside world to determine if you're enlightened or not, that's not what's going to determine that. There were still people who were learning with the Buddha, who were very angry and bitter and harsh with him, right? So it's not about the outside world and what's happening there. It's about the inner world and what's going on in your own mind. So an individual who's enlightened would be able to get along with everybody and anybody, but not everybody and everybody will be able to get along with that enlightened being. But that person is having difficulties getting along with that. So many people in their life, not just the individual who is enlightened, but other people too, because it's their own cravings, desires, attachments. It's their own anger, hatred, and ill will, and it's their own ignorance or unknowing of true reality, their lack of wisdom that is causing them difficulties in those relationships. And the thing is when you're enlightened and those kinds of people come in contact with you and they get really angry and frustrated and bitter, they will tend to go away from you anyway. Because of their aversion, they will tend to push you away and they will go away. So that's why an enlightened being, all their relationships are harmonious because they don't have bitterness and harshness and hostility around them, because the people who are being bitter and harsh and hostile, that doesn't land on an enlightened being. They don't feed into that. They don't feed those cravings. They don't feed those expectations. They don't feed those relationships where people are putting expectations on them and becoming discontent because their expectations aren't being met. So an enlightened being will just move beyond those types of relationships. But in your journey to enlightenment, you're going to need to work out some of your relationships in order to be able to get to this point where they're all harmonious. But even when your mind's enlightened, you will still experience old age, sickness, death, destruction, and loss, because this is all impermanence. But in the enlightened mental state, your mind will be completely peaceful and joyful, even when these things are occurring. Whether it's your aging, sickness, and death, and loss and destruction, or whether it's people that are close to you, maybe your life partner, your children, your parents, as they get older, as they have illness, as they die, as they experience destruction and loss, you might have a lot of issues with that. So you're going to need to be able to get to the point where you're completely comfortable, not only with the impermanence that is occurring in your life, but the impermanence in other people's lives around you as well. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Lower in this discourse, the Buddha just goes into a lot more detail about each one of these, but you can gain the insight from just this first part, and we can talk about it if you guys have questions. Okay, so it looks like Chris has a question here. He says, is this discourse suggesting that Brahma, God, and by extension his creation, is all impermanent? Yes, the Buddha actually says this directly in other discourses. He says the Brahma, this being of God, is impermanent. That's different than what you'll hear in a Christian tradition. But we know these natural laws, and God is a being that lives within these natural laws. It's not like there's any beings outside of these natural laws. Even God himself is subject to impermanence, right? So the Buddha says it very clearly in other discourses that God is impermanent. And then also he talks about the world as being impermanent as well. In terms of the earth itself, we know that the earth itself and humanity on earth is impermanent. But in terms of the overall universe, in terms of like the greater world beyond the earth, that's what the Buddha left as being undeclared, of whether or not the entire world will go on forever, whether it's finite or infinite, and these kinds of things. But we know, and he's talked about in his teachings, and we can see and independently verify for ourselves that the earth, this planet we live on, is impermanent, and that the humanity that lives on this planet is impermanent too, because this planet and human beings, we arose. So right away, you know, it's a conditioned object. It changes and then it's going to fade away. And the same thing with God. This being arose, this being changed, and this being will fade away. But the difference is that this being has an enormous lifespan as opposed to a human being. Okay. I don't see any other questions anywhere. Vipava, I see your hands up. Is that from before or is that a question?
This is a question I put in the chat. What kind of destruction or loss would Brahma experience?
Oh, okay. I am not Brahma, so I don't know. Maybe you ask Brahma, you know, what kind of loss or destruction Brahma experiences. But the Buddha is saying that it would be impossible for any being to be able to not experience these things.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mayuli has a question. She says, "Teacher, is God considered as a heavenly being?" In my opinion, God is not a heavenly being. God is outside of that, but he's usually responsible, or I should say, he's usually attributed to the heavenly realm, right? Even though this being God, has all knowledge, all power, all understanding. We usually associate God with the heavenly realm, but not as a heavenly being, because there's different types of beings. Just like in the human realm, we have people from Laos. You're from Laos, Mayuli. We have Vibha from India. We have other people from Canada and the US and France and all these different places that are joining us right now. And there's different types of beings in the human realm. And the same thing is true about these other realms, is that there's different types of beings within these realms. So even though we call them a heavenly being, and and those beings are in the heavenly realm, there's other beings there too, like God, right? So this being is usually associated with the heavenly realm, but in reality, this being is everywhere at all times. This being has all knowledge and all power to be able to know all things. And by the way, tomorrow in the group learning program, I'm going to be teaching chapter 18 from our book, which is all about God. So if you guys have any interest in learning more about this being, you're welcome to attend tomorrow at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m., which is the group learning program. This is where I'll be sharing God's creative actions. You have free will. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 54. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
All things wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. Householder, there are these four things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. What for? When things, may wealth come to me righteously. This is the first thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. Having gained wealth righteously, when things, may fame come to me and to my relatives and ancestors. This is the second thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, rarely gained in the world. Having gained wealth righteously and having gained fame for oneself and for one's relatives and ancestors. When things, may I live long and enjoy a long lifespan. This is the third thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, rarely gained in the world. Having gained wealth righteously, having gained fame for oneself and for one's relatives and ancestors, living long and enjoying a long lifespan. When things, with the breakup of the body, after death, may I be reborn in a good destination in the heavenly world. This is the fourth thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, rarely gained in the world. These are the four things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. There are householders. Four are the things that lead to obtaining those four things. What for? Accomplishment in confidence, accomplishment in virtuous behavior, accomplishment in generosity, and accomplishment in wisdom. And what householder is accomplishment in confidence? Here, a noble disciple is endowed with confidence. He places confidence in the enlightenment of the Tathagata thus. The perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate knower of the world, unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the perfectly enlightened one. This is called accomplishment in confidence. And what is accomplishment in virtuous behavior? Here, a noble disciple abstains from the destruction of life, abstains from taking what is not given, abstains from sexual misconduct, abstains from false speech, abstains from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause hedonism, the basis for hedonism. This is called accomplishment in virtuous behavior. And what is accomplishment in generosity? Here, a noble disciple resides at home with a mind free from stain of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in relinquishment, devoted to charity, joyful in giving and sharing. This is called accomplishment in generosity. And what is accomplishment in wisdom? If one dwells with a mind overcome by longing and unrighteous sensual desires, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty, so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by ill will, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty, so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by complacency, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty, so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by restlessness and worry, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty, so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by doubt, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty, so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. When householder, a noble disciple, has understood thus, longing and unrighteous sensual desire are a defilement of the mind, he abandons them. When he has understood thus, ill will is a defilement of the mind, he abandons it. When he has understood thus, complacency is a defilement of the mind, he abandons it. When he has understood thus, restlessness and worry are a defilement of the mind, he abandons them. When he has understood thus, doubt is a defilement of the mind, he abandons it. When householder, a noble disciple, has understood thus, longing and unrighteous sensual desires are a defilement of the mind, and has abandoned them. When he has understood thus, ill will is a defilement of the mind, and has abandoned it. When he has understood thus, complacency is a defilement of the mind, and has abandoned it. When he has understood thus, restlessness and worry are a defilement of the mind, and has abandoned them. When he has understood thus, doubt is a defilement of the mind, and has abandoned it. He is then called a noble disciple of great wisdom, of wide wisdom, one who sees the range, one accomplished in wisdom. This is called accomplishment in wisdom. These are the four things that lead to obtaining the four things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So this discourse starts out with the Buddha describing these four things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. This is wealth, fame, long life, and what was the other one here? Let's see, there's wealth, fame, long life, and being reborn in a good destination like the heavenly world. That's what people tend to long and yearn for, right? And oftentimes the mind is just longing, yearning, maybe practicing certain superstitious things and beliefs to try to be able to accomplish these things. But that's not what's going to accomplish these things. Not that you should chase after these things, but what the Buddha teaches you is that if you're interested in acquiring these things, then the way to do that is through learning and practicing the teachings, by having accomplishment in confidence, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom. That's what's actually going to lead to the production of having wealth, long life, fame, And if you're interested in being reborn into a heavenly world, that's what's going to help you to be able to accomplish that. But ultimately, what I would suggest that you set your sights on is getting to enlightenment, because any of those four things pale in comparison to actually getting to enlightenment, because those four things, they're actually impermanent. Wealth, fame, long life, and being reborn in the heavenly world, that's all impermanent. That's not the ultimate goal in this path. The ultimate goal is to get to enlightenment. This is a permanent mental state. And the same things that lead to acquiring those things are the same things that lead to enlightenment as well. And the Buddha knew that, so that's why he's teaching you, hey, this is what leads to those things. And also, if you're learning and practicing these particular things, that's also what's going to lead to your enlightenment. So we talked about confidence in this class already, about how that's accomplishment in the confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own development on the path to enlightenment. Here, the Buddha is focusing on accomplishment of confidence in terms of confidence in him, because if you have confidence in him, the other ones will tend to come. But you're not going to have confidence in the Buddha when you first start on the path. That's why it's important that you stay focused on learning and growing and developing on the path. And the confidence will come as you see and independently verify his teachings, and you see that the condition of your mind and your life's improving. Then, if you develop accomplishment in virtuous behavior, where you're not causing harm through any of your moral conduct, now you can get to the point where you're improving your karma, and you're more likely to experience improved wealth and long life and fame and these other things like being reborn in the heavenly world. Because here the Buddha is essentially talking about the 5 precepts of destruction of life, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, false speech, and ingesting substances that would cause heedlessness. If you can purge all of that from your life, where you're not doing any of those things any longer, and understanding those through the 5 precepts, because the 5 precepts give you a lot more detail than just what you see here. You're going to need to be able to study the 5 precepts through the words of the Buddha, and then having a teacher guide you and being able to see how to apply that in your day-to-day life. And if you can develop your mind to the point where you're practicing those closely, now you've accomplished virtuous behavior. And now you do that for an extended period of time, and that's significantly reducing your unwholesome karma production. Practicing the 5 precepts won't extinguish your unwholesome karma production, but it'll significantly reduce it. And then it's the rest of the Eightfold Path that's going to completely extinguish it 100%. And then having accomplishment in generosity, this is going to help train your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, because when you're giving and sharing, eliminating selfishness, living open-handedly and being joyful and giving and sharing with others, this is going to help train your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, the underlying cause of all discontentedness. And then it's the cultivation of wisdom. You're always cultivating wisdom on the path to enlightenment. But specifically what the Buddha is talking about here is what's referred to as the 5 hindrances. These are the 5 things that will hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment. It's having sensual desire. That's the first one, right? The longing, yearning through the sense bases. And if you get what you want, you get pleasant feelings. And if you don't get what you want, you get the painful ones. And then when that's arising, there can be ill will in the mind, the anger, hatred, and ill will towards others, right? Then there's this complacency, where an individual's dull or lethargic or lazy. You can understand this in terms of like not coming to class and not meditating, not consulting with your teacher, not reading your book. You can understand that all those things are complacency. But if you look deeply in the teachings of the Buddha, he talks about complacency all the way to the level of you have an unwholesome thought in the mind and you do nothing about it, that the mind's complacent. So if you're just sitting at your house, maybe you're coming to classes, maybe you're meditating, maybe you're reading books and all that stuff, but you're sitting at your house and an unwholesome thought comes up and you just sit there and let it stay. Or you're walking down the street and you start judging people and you don't do anything about it. You just let the mind dwell in that. That's complacency. So you like to practice that mental discipline to cut that off and let it go. And then there's the restlessness and worry. That's the overactivity of the mind, that the mind's not calm and centered and stable and steady. There's this overactivity or restlessness in the mind, this anxiety. And then one of the 5 hindrances is doubt as well. So 4 out of the 5 hindrances are actually part of the fetters themselves. So sensual desire, ill will, restlessness and worry, or at least restlessness, and then doubt is all part of the 10 fetters. Complacency is not part of the 10 fetters, But where complacency comes from is it comes from sensual desire, typically. The mind's holding on to Facebook and YouTube, or it's holding on to some other thing that maybe isn't so beneficial for you, where you could really be over here reading books and meditating and attending classes. And, that's where that comes from. And the mind doesn't have this vitality and vigor, this energy to be able to apply the effort to cut off and eliminate those unwholesome thoughts that are coming up. So that's why the Buddha says that all of these actually will spoil your qualities that you're looking to cultivate. The fame and the peacefulness, it's all spoiled. So those things that someone is aspiring to attain, the long life, the fame, the fortune, right, the wealth, and the being reborn in the heavenly world, this is all spoiled through these 5 hindrances. So it's through eliminating the 5 hindrances that one now can experience improvement in their mind and the way that they experience life, and potentially obtaining those things that he's talking about. So this is accomplishment in wisdom, that if you understand the 5 hindrances and you understand what they are, you understand the symptoms of them, you understand how to eliminate them, and you understand how to know that you've eliminated them, then you've got this accomplishment in wisdom, and that you've eliminated these defilements out of the mind, you've abandoned them. So it's not just the intellectual part, that's the first part that you need, but then you need to practice it so that you actually abandon those things from the mind. And this is accomplishment in wisdom. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular discourse. Okay, I don't see any questions here. So let's move on to the next one. Here again, you've got a lot of details for me helping you guys, even including the 5 hindrances here with the words of the Buddha. Now we're at chapter 55. Is there someone who would like to read this? Actually, you know what? We're going to skip this one. I'll just explain to you guys what this is. We don't actually need to read it. What this is where the Buddha is talking about how if somebody has certain qualities, that they will then be able to essentially reappear in a future destination based on what it is that they're interested in experiencing. And of course, the goal isn't to be able to experience rebirth, but he wraps in here the confidence, the virtuous behavior, learning, and generosity and wisdom. He's talking about these qualities of mind. And then that if you have these qualities of mind and you are going to be reborn, that there's the potential for you to be reborn into a certain realm. So I don't think we need to read this, because I suspect that you guys are interested in getting to enlightenment, not rebirth. And this one is actually quite long as well. So I don't think we need to read that just out of the interest and time. Also, I don't think we need to read this one either, about worshiping this being called Saka. This was considered to be the ruler of the heavenly beings. So, this isn't something that necessarily applies here, but I have it in here because you'll see it from time to time if you're studying the teachings of the Buddha. We can read this one, chapter 57. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Vibhav. I'm going to say I'll maybe read today.
Truly favorable and optimistic. Monks, those beings who engage in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind in the morning have a good morning. Those beings who engage in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind in the afternoon have a good afternoon. And those beings who engage in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind in the evening have a good evening. Truly favorable and optimistic, a peaceful daybreak and a joyful rising, a precious moment and a cheerful hour will come for those who offer alms, a donation, to those leading the spiritual life. Thank you.
All right, Vibhav. So here, this is pretty self-explanatory, right? If you allow your mind to go down into that grumpiness and irritability and all that kind of stuff, you're going to have a bad morning, a bad afternoon, and a bad evening. But if you can keep your mind bright and cheerful and uplifted and optimistic, now this truly favorable condition that you're maintaining in your mind, if you're doing that morning, afternoon, and evening, you're going to have a good morning, afternoon, and evening. So you really like to be attentive to the mind. This is your mindfulness, that wherever you see your mind dipping into that grumpiness and irritability, even when it's starting to look in that direction, you need to be able to see that with your mindfulness and cut that off and be like, no, I'm not going down that path today because I know where that leads. if I allow the mind to even dip its toe in that grumpiness, next thing you know, it's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 days where you're sitting around grumpy and irritable. So you would like to be able to use your mindfulness to keep your mind uplifted and bright and cheerful and glad. And where you see your mind headed in the other direction from that, you'd like to pull the mind back. Because if you allow the mind to stay wired this way, where it's experiencing this grumpiness and irritability, it's just going to keep doing that over and over again. So you're going to need to maintain your mindfulness so you can apply right effort and keep the mind bright and cheerful and uplifted as you go throughout your day, no matter what happens. Somebody honks their horn at you in traffic. Okay, that's up to them, right? You're just going to keep on driving or do whatever you need to do, right? Or somebody, is driving really slow or cuts you off. Okay, up to them. You're not in a hurry. You're just kind of taking your time to get to where you need to go. Or, any number of different things. Maybe you're in the grocery store and somebody's looking at you cross-eyed, or maybe somebody's being grumpy and irritable and nasty. Maybe someone takes your shopping cart. Maybe you turned your back for a few moments and someone takes your shopping cart. Okay, no big deal. Just some impermanence. I'll go get another shopping cart, right? Just keep the mind bright and cheerful and uplifted. Don't even allow it to look down the direction of being irritable or grumpy in any way whatsoever. And that's what the Buddha is helping you to be able to see here. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Okay, I see Vipab, your hand's up. Is that from reading or you have a question?
That's the reading, sorry.
Oh, okay, no worries. Okay, so I don't see any questions anywhere. So now there's this right and wrong refuge. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Keely. I guess it's the Vipab and Keely show today.
Right and wrong refuge. They go to many a refuge, to mountains and forests, to parks and tree shrines. People threatened with danger. That's not the secure refuge, not the supreme refuge. That's not a refuge having gone to which you gain release from all discontentedness and stress. But when, having gone to the Buddha, the teachings, and the community for refuge, you see with right wisdom the Four Noble Truths: stress, the cause of stress, the transcending of stress, and the Noble Eightfold Path, the way to the stilling of stress. That's the secure refuge, that the supreme refuge. That is the refuge having gone to which you gain release from all discontentedness and stress. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So, sometimes when an individual is experiencing stress, maybe like in their day-to-day life at work and stuff like this, they might think, oh, the way to solve this is let me go rent a cabin in the woods for the weekend, or let me go for a week away to this vacation or this place or that place. And that's what the Buddha is essentially describing here. He's talking about this refuge that people want to go to in the mountains, in the forests, parks, tree shrines, when people are threatened with danger or ultimately any kind of discontent feelings. They want to run away to this protection somewhere else. That's what a refuge is protection. But he's saying that's not the secure protection, right? That's not what's going to eliminate your discontentedness. You can run away to the mountains, but your mind's going to follow you there. You can go to the forest or to the parks or tree shrines, but your mind's going to follow you there. So if you're not actually training your mind, you're not actually getting to the secure refuge. If you're having danger in your day-to-day life, it's from decisions that you're making. And you're going to need to cultivate wisdom to now overcome that so that now you can experience improvement. And that's why he says, having gone to the Buddha, the teachings in the community for refuge or for protection, now you'll see with right wisdom the Four Noble Truths. That's what's actually going to lead to the ending of stress. That's the secure refuge, the supreme refuge, because you can get to a point where your mind's completely protected and you've gained release from all discontentedness and stress through learning, practicing, and training your mind. So going to a cabin in the woods, okay, great. That's fun to do from time to time, but you need to be sure that you understand that that's not what's going to end your stress. And, it's great that we take vacations and we take time off, but really, if you create this wonderful life for yourself, this life that you can create in terms of the path to enlightenment, you really don't need a vacation from that life. You still will take a vacation, but oftentimes when we have a certain life that we've constructed, we take a vacation from that life and it's like, oh my goodness, thank gosh I can go on vacation. Oh, this is so great, right? And then when it's time to finish your vacation, you really dread going back to this life. But this is a life that you've actually created, right? So what the Buddha is actually guiding you to do is to essentially break down all those unwise decisions that you've made and now construct a wonderful life for yourself based in wisdom and the natural laws that you thoroughly enjoy. It's living the ideal life. And sure, you'll still take a vacation, but it's like, hey, I enjoy my life and I enjoy my vacation too. And when it's time to go back to your life, it's in this life that you've created, you enjoy that too. You're not dreading going back to your life. So if you're experiencing that, where you really dread the things that you experience on a day-to-day basis, and when you go on holiday and vacation, you dread going back to your life, that's because you haven't constructed the ideal life yet. The mind is still unenlightened, and you would like to construct that ideal life for yourself so that you thoroughly enjoy all aspects of your life. And that's where you'll gain release from all this discontentedness, because you'll have trained your mind and you'll be living the ideal, perfect life for yourself. Let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter, the right and wrong refuge or protection. Okay, looks like we have a question coming in here. This is from Chris. It says, is there certain wisdom in curtailing the conditions to train the mind, at least some of the time? For example, monks who choose to train at a temple in the forest. I'm reading this a little bit differently than maybe what you're meaning it, Chris. Let's see. Is there certain wisdom in curtailing the conditions to train the mind? I don't know if you're meaning like go around them or let's see. You've got some more information here. Selecting. I see. Yes. So there are situations that you would like to put the mind into in order to train your mind. Right? In your day-to-day life, you need to be able to build up your practice that in your day-to-day life, you're training your mind. It's a full-time job, right? This is why the whole idea of going away to a retreat for 10 days or 30 days, okay, you could do those kinds of things. But if you haven't built up a consistent long-term practice for yourself, where you're practicing day in and day out, the entire Eightfold Path, you'll never see enlightenment, right? So going away to select certain environments in which to train your mind, this is only beneficial for you being able to see what is your mind craving and desiring in your life, so that then when you come out of that situation, then you can actually work to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. So for example, as a household practitioner, if you were training for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and your mind's pretty darn peaceful because you've been training it pretty closely throughout all your waking hours, well, maybe you think you're pretty enlightened at that point. Well, it's a good time to go away to a retreat, right? Go away for 5 days, maybe 10 days at the very most. You don't need much more time than that. And now when you're in this retreat, you don't have your mobile phone, you don't have your computer, you're not talking to all your friends and your family, you don't have that favorite pillow, you don't have that special drink that you normally drink each morning. Now you can see, what is the mind longing, yearning for, if anything at all, right? Because in that retreat, it's exposing your mind to what it is that you're longing, yearning for, because you don't have all the things that you normally have. So going out into the forest, that's what that's about. Spending time alone, and you don't have all the readily accessible things right at your fingertips that you normally have. And now let's just say you're in a retreat in our days, during the lifetime of the Buddha, it was in the forest, but in a retreat for 5 days or 10 days, and you've picked up 3, 4, 5, 6 different things that you see your mind's longing, yearning for. Perfect. You figured out the dust in the corners. Now the real work begins when you get outside the retreat. In that retreat by itself, it's not going to change anything about your life, because your life is your life, living your life day to day. So the retreat just exposes to you the things that your mind's longing, yearning for, that special pillow or special drink or any number of things that you've discovered. Now, when you go back home, you set aside the pillow. You choose not to drink that drink for a few weeks or a few months, and you train your mind to let these things go. And that's where now your mind is more fully let go. And then you might just start using that pillow or that blanket or having that drink because it's something you enjoy, but your mind can do without it. where when you were in the retreat, you were discontent because you didn't have it. But now at home, you can train your mind to let it go mentally. And then ultimately, after your mind's let it go, you can bring it back into your life. And you'll be able to see that your mind can be peaceful and joyful, whether you have it or whether you don't. So there's nothing special about going out into the woods or going to a retreat or anything like this. You first need to be able to develop your wisdom around the teachings. And then after several years, and this is what the Buddha taught as well, that you would like to develop your wisdom around the community first, then go out into retreats where maybe there's a silent retreat or something like this. And like I mentioned, an individual shouldn't need more than 5 or 10 days. If their mindfulness is really well developed, they shouldn't need much more time than that. And they would have the wisdom to be able to see their mind. That's where you're actually going to be able to figure out what your mind's craving and then make the decisions outside of the retreat in order to be able to train your mind to let go. So putting the mind in these situations is definitely beneficial for you, but you need to do it at the right time after you've already had enough exposure to the teachings and that you're not just brand new at this. Even multiple years of training would be wise before going off into one of those situations. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's move to the next chapter. This is chapter 59. I don't think we need to read this one either. This is talking about a festival that was going on during the lifetime of the Buddha. And there were people who were asking him essentially how to practice his teachings in regards to this particular festival that was going on. You guys can read this on your own and just let me know if you have any questions by putting those into Facebook. Send me a private message, or you can schedule personal guidance if you like, because he's basically talking about other aspects of his teachings that you guys already know and relating it to this festival, helping people of essentially the Hindu tradition of understanding how to practice his teachings in regards to that. And this is the same thing, just a second discourse where he's talking about it in a different way. So let's see what we've got here for chapter 61. Oh, okay, same thing, just a different discourse, right? And now let's get down here. 62 is the same thing. Oh, wow, we're actually going to have more time than I thought. So now we can go to 63. This is responsibilities of a teacher. Would someone like to read this? Okay, Vibhav. I'm going to say maybe I'll read this one.
You could read this one, yes. Your responsibilities. Responsibilities of a teacher. Monks. When a cattle worker possesses 11 factors, he is capable of keeping and caring for a herd of cattle. What 11? Here, a cattle worker has wisdom of form. He is skilled in characteristics. He removes flies' eggs. He dresses wounds. He smokes out the sheds. He knows the watering place. He knows what it is to have drunk. He knows the road. He is skilled in pastures. He does not let milk dry. And he shows extra veneration to those bulls who are fathers and leaders of the herd. When a cattle worker possesses these 11 factors, he is capable of keeping and caring for a herd of cattle. So too monks. When a monk possesses these 11 qualities, he is capable of growth, increase and maturity in the teachings and discipline. What 11? Here a monk has wisdom of form. He is skilled in characteristics. He removes flies' eggs. He dresses wounds. He smokes out the sheds. He knows the watering place. He knows what it is to have drunk. He knows the road. He is skilled in pastures. He does not milk dry. And he shows extra veneration to those elder monks of long standing who have gone forth, the fathers and the leaders of the community. And how is a monk skilled in characteristics? Here, a monk understands that it really is thus. An unwise person is characterized by his actions. A wise person is characterized by his actions. It is in this way that a monk is skilled in characteristics. And how does a monk smoke out the sheds? Here, a monk teaches the teachings to others in detail, and he has heard it and learned it, as he has learned it, heard it and learned it. It is in this way that a monk smokes out the sheds. And how does a monk know the watering place? Here, from time to time, a monk approaches those monks who are learned, heirs to the heritage, experts in the teachings, experts in the discipline, experts in the outlines, and inquires of them. How is this, venerable sir? What is the meaning of this? Those venerable ones then disclose to him what has not been disclosed, clear about is obscure, and dispel this perplexity about numerous perplexing perplexing points. It is in this way that a monk knows the watering place. And the monk know what it is to have drunk. Here, when the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata is being taught, a monk gains inspiration in the meaning, gains inspiration in the teachings, gains joy connected with the teachings. It is in this way that a monk knows what it is to have drunk. How does a monk know the road? Here, a monk understands the noble eightfold path as it really is. It is in this way that a monk knows the road. Now, a monk is skilled in pastures. Here, a monk understands the four foundations of mindfulness as they really are. It is in this way that a monk is skilled in pastures. And how does a monk not milk dry? Here, when dedicated household practitioners invite a monk to take robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines and provides provisions for the sick, a monk is moderate in accepting donations. It is in this way that a monk knows not milk dry, does not milk dry. The monk show extra veneration for those elder monks of long standing, have long gone forth, fathers and leaders of the community. Here, a monk maintains bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both openly and privately towards those elder monks of long standing and have long gone forth, the fathers and leaders of the community. It is in this way that a monk shows extra veneration to those elder monks of long standing who have long gone forth, the fathers and leaders of the community. Possessing these 11 qualities, a monk is capable of growth, progress, and fulfillment in this teaching and discipline. Thanks.
Okay, I'll just read this last part. It says, here only 8 of the 11 factors are shared, as these 8 apply to generosity and gratitude. See the included reference for the entire teaching. So here, this is 8 individual factors that applies to responsibilities of a teacher that have been assembled to be able to help anybody who's either a teacher or aspiring to be a teacher to understand the qualities of mind and the qualities of your wisdom that you would need to develop in order to be a very well-developed teacher on the path to enlightenment. And the Buddha here is describing this in regards to cattle herding. This is something that people would have been very familiar with during his lifetime, that there was a lot of farming going on. And even if you weren't a farmer, you would be very familiar with it because there was a lot of that going on. So the Buddha regularly does this, that does analogies based on farming. So there's certain characteristics that an individual would be familiar with, which means that they would understand that a person is essentially described in terms of who they are, in terms of whether or not it would be wise or unwise to spend time with this person based on their actions, not just their words. And whether a person's unwise or wise, it's based on their actions that determine that. It's not based on your words. So somebody could intellectually know the teachings, but they could be very bitter and harsh and hostile. I've run across people like this, that intellectually they have some understanding of the teachings, but they're very bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive. So the person's actions don't match up with their intellectual understanding. So you can understand that that person is actually unwise. They're an unwise person because while they intellectually understand the teachings, they're not making the decisions through that. So therefore, they're not basing their decision-making in wisdom. So you would like to be able to see a person's actions are wise, and you would like to develop the wisdom so that you can then make your decisions through that wisdom as well. You're never interested in judging people or looking down on people, but this is just what you'll observe, is that it's a person's actions that determines whether they're wise or unwise, not just, the fact that they have a lot of money or that they're on the news or that maybe they're the owner of a particular company. You need to be able to look at a person's speech, their bodily actions, their verbal actions, their mental actions, all of those things. Then the Buddha here talks about smoking out the sheds, right? This is that when you have heard the teachings, that you share them with others in detail, right? That's smoking out the sheds. This is part of being a cattle worker. And then knowing the watering places. This is actually understanding who are the senior people who are actually experts on the teachings, and then being able to go to those individuals and be able to learn the teachings deeply. That's the watering place. That's where you're, filling up essentially. And then having drunk is to be able to, when you've heard the teachings and the discipline that the Buddha teaches, that you gain this inspiration, that you have this joy connected with being able to learn and understand the teachings, that you've now drunk, that you've absorbed the teachings from senior people in the community or a particular teacher, and now you feel joy connected with that. You have this inspiration like, wow, I've got more wisdom here to be able to go out into the world and make better decisions and improve my life. That's what it means to have drunk, is that, hey, I've got some wisdom to really help me here. Knowing the road is to know the Eightfold Path. If you don't know the road, how could you ever herd these cattle and take them from one place to the other? So you're going to need to know the road for being a cattle worker. But if you're going to be interested in either getting to enlightenment or being a teacher who's guiding others to enlightenment, you're going to need to know the Eightfold Path inside and out, backwards and forward. So if you don't know the path, if you don't know the Eightfold Path, you could never guide anybody to enlightenment because you yourself don't know the path to enlightenment. And then being skilled in pastures is to know the four foundations of mindfulness, because that's the real pivotal thing that's really going to be the catalyst to helping you be able to transform your mind. I talked about this in our last class last week, how this is like the real linchpin that's really helping you to be able to overcome the discontentedness, because you need to be able to cut off and let go at the bodily sensations. And if you're not able to do that, then you would like to develop that ability. And this is found in the four foundations of mindfulness. And as a teacher, you would need to understand the four foundations of mindfulness to be able to then teach them to others, because that's what's going to help them to be able to get to enlightenment. And then you need to be sure that if you're setting up as a teacher or you're accepting donations from people, that you're not milk drying. Milk is the representation of the person's wealth or assets or their time and their energy. And now as people are making offerings to you, the Buddha teaches you to accept this in moderation, right? Because if you dry up the cow, it's not going to be able to provide any milk for itself or the other people around it. So you would like to be able to make sure you know your students and you know their background. Whereas if somebody's making an exorbitant amount of offerings to you and you know that they're struggling financially, you might decide to have a talk with them. There was several occasions where I've had to do this with different students. There was one time somebody was making offerings or considering making offerings to me, and I knew that their wife had just gotten laid off from work, and it was only one person that was actually making money in the household. And this person up to that point had actually never made any offerings to me whatsoever. But they were saying, hey, David, I've been studying with you now for like 8 months, 12 months. I'd really like to make an offering for you. And I was like, yeah, but didn't your wife just get laid off? And they were like, yeah, I was like, well, what about your bills? Like I didn't tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing, but I just kind of asked them questions that guided them to be able to see for themselves whether or not they thought this would truly be a wise decision or not, right? Because you're not interested in controlling people or putting your expectations on people or telling people what they should or shouldn't be doing. But as a teacher, you need to be responsible to understand the practice of your individual students so that you can guide them to be able to make wise decisions. And one of the things that you're teaching as a teacher is the practice of generosity. But because students aren't typically in the middle, even with things like their generosity, then they can swing from side to side. You can have somebody that's very, very selfish, right, and really clings to their resources really tightly. But then you can have somebody that's all the way on the other side of that, really spending all kinds of money, effort, and time and energy to be able to support the teachings. And you need to be able to understand that person to make sure that you know that they are able to do that and they're not depleting their own resources, because students tend to not be in the middle, even with their generosity. So you're going to need to guide them to come to the middle so that you're not just absorbing all of their resources that then would take away from their own ability to support themselves. Because if you're guiding people to an improved way of life in discernment and wise decision making, you would like to see this person be successful in the world, and that they're going to need to have time, effort, energy, and resources for themselves. And if you're absorbing all of that, you're going to dry this out, and then they're not going to be able to support themselves. So as a teacher, you would like to be able to be aware of those kinds of things. And then ultimately, the Buddha talks about, veneration of elder monks and long-standing ordained practitioners. He's calling them the father and the leaders of the community, because that's the way it should be. We don't necessarily see that a whole lot today, because you've got, many ordained practitioners in the world. You've got millions, but very few of them are actually learning and practicing based on the original words of the Buddha and are actually true leaders. But the ones that are, it's really important to be able to know that And then the Buddha is saying that, you maintain this bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both openly and privately, towards these elder monks, because these individuals who are either monks or teachers who are practicing the teachings closely and then sharing them with others, there's a lot of work involved in sharing the teachings of the Buddha with people. You're sharing the teachings as a teacher with people who are unenlightened, and they're going to get grumpy, they're going to get irritable, their ego is going to rise up, and it's going to be directed toward you, and you're going to need to be able to maintain your peace and your joy in this situation, right? So what you would like to be able to do as a teacher and as a practitioner is always maintain this bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both openly and private, towards people who are well developed on the path to enlightenment, and that you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile to the people around you, because if you're guiding people to enlightenment, then you're going to need to be able to be practicing the teachings closely yourself, because you're teaching just as much through your spoken words as you are through your actions. And you would like to be sure that you're helping your students to be able to learn, not just through your spoken words, but through your actions as well. And maintaining bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both openly and privately, towards people who are well developed in the path to enlightenment is going to help you. And it's also going to help your students to be able to see how to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to essentially elders, right? That's what the Buddha is essentially talking about here. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this discourse. This would be helpful for anybody who's, considering to be a teacher or is a teacher. But there's also some things in here that can help you just in terms of developing your practice on the path to enlightenment as well. Remember, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, looks like Vibhav, you have a question? Go ahead, sir.
No, I'm not sorry, just...
Oh, okay, that was for reading? Okay, sure. I don't see any questions, so I did not realize that we would actually get through all of these chapters and the way that we did, but we have this one chapter left, chapter 64. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Looks like it's about one page. I had a feeling it was going to be Keely. All right, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. Who should you not teach and who should you teach? Monks. Someone with 6 features is unable to enter the sure path with regards to skillful qualities, even when listening to the true teachings. What 6? When the teachings and practice proclaimed by the perfectly enlightened one is being taught. 1. They are not interested to listen. 2. They do not actively listen. 3. They do not apply efforts to understand. 4. They learn the incorrect meaning. 5. They ignore the correct meaning. 6. They adopt wills that contradict the teachings. Someone with these 6 features is unable to enter the sure path with regards to skillful qualities, even when listening to the true teaching. Someone with 6 qualities is able to enter the sure path with regards to skillful qualities when listening to the true teachings. What 6? When the teachings and practice proclaimed by the perfectly enlightened one is being taught. 1. They are interested to listen. 2. They actively listen. 3. They apply efforts to understand. 4. They learn the correct meaning. 5. They ignore the incorrect meaning. 6. They adopt wills that match with the teachings. Someone with these 6 qualities is able to enter the sure path with regards to skillful qualities when listening to the true teachings. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So this is helping you to figure out who would it be wise to teach and who would it be unwise to teach. Because remember, everything you're doing on the path to enlightenment is based in discernment, wise decision making. And if you were to teach someone who would be unwise to teach, you're just wasting your time. Now, of course, anybody who's on the path to enlightenment and who is either enlightened or close to it, that is a teacher, you would be open to teaching everybody and anybody, meaning you would be open to teaching everybody and anybody. But in terms of who you should choose to teach is different, right? Here, what the Buddha is essentially talking about is someone who's disinterested in the teachings, someone who is not interested in listening to the teachings. They don't actively listen to the teachings. They don't apply effort to understand them. They don't learn. They actually learn the incorrect meaning. They ignore the correct meaning, and they adopt views that are contradicting the teachings. So in this case, this person really isn't an actual student because they haven't chosen to be able to listen, right? So this is like if you were to give someone unsolicited guidance, if you were to just step in and start pushing teachings on someone, this would be coming from your own craving and your own conceit. And it would be unwise to do that because you're wasting your time and you're generating unwholesome karma in that situation. So what you would like to do is actually teach people, if you're going to teach, based on these qualities, people who are actually interested in listening, who are actively listening, that are applying effort to understand, meaning they're probably going to be asking you questions about the teachings, that they learn the correct meaning and they ignore the incorrect meaning. And then they adopt views that match with the teachings, meaning they cultivate wisdom in line with the teachings. And now they understand that wisdom. Sometimes people see that the Buddha taught to eliminate clinging to views. And sometimes people think that means that you have no views whatsoever. That's not true, right? That by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll understand the truth. You're just not clinging to that truth. You know that it's the truth, but you're not longing, yearning, and clinging to it, trying to go out there and convince other people that you know the truth. So here, the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that if you're interested in being successful at sharing these teachings, either as a teacher or even within your own family unit, you would like to make sure these things exist. So one of the things that I do is I will just say, wow, you know, that thing that you're challenged with right there, the Buddha has a really wonderful teaching that would help you in that situation. And if they're like, really, what is it? Right now, they're ready to actively listen and they're going to apply effort to understand. So it's time to now start sharing with them. But if I say, you know, the Buddha has a really wonderful teaching that'll help you in that situation, and they don't say anything at all, and we're just off to the next topic, I don't share teachings with them because they are not interested in listening to the teachings. They haven't decided to actively listen and understand the teaching. So it's not the right person to be able to teach in that situation. So you'd like to be able to make sure you're always practicing discernment, wise decision making, and going out into the world trying to teach people who aren't interested in learning with you. That's very unwise. And you're just going to experience unwholesome results in that situation. So you'd like to be sure your craving and clinging and your own conceit isn't involved here, and that you make sure that you practice discernment, wise decision making to share the teachings with only those people who are truly interested, while at the same time being open to teaching everybody and anybody. But if you see someone's truly not interested in learning, no need to teach them. Even there's sometimes, every once in a while, a student will come to the temple, right? In an entire year, there might be 2 or 3 people like this, where they'll actually physically wake up in the morning, take a shower, have breakfast, put on their clothes, comb their hair, come to the temple, sit down, do the meditations, do all that kind of thing. And they're not even interested to learn. They might actually be sitting there trying to teach me about what they think that the teachings of the Buddha are, right? They're not interested in learning. Sometimes I even, when I hear them talk and they are supposed to be asking a question, but they're not, they're just making a statement, I will ask them, you know, what is your question? Because if they don't have a question and they're not really truly interested in learning, it doesn't even make sense to teach this person. Just move on, right? So if you're in an established teaching role, this is something to keep in mind, but also in your family unit as well, that you're not interested in just pushing teachings on brother and sister, or mom and dad, your life partner, or even your children. You're not even interested in pushing teachings on them either. You're not interested in forcing or controlling anybody to do anything at all. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Vibhav might have a question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, actually, there was a situation yesterday that happened when my daughter and I was dropping her to school, and she was talking kind of negatively about a friend, and she didn't realize that the phone was on and the friend was on the other side, and she heard it. And then there was, some discussion between them, and there was some issue with that. And so when she came back from school, at that point I didn't say anything. And then when she came back and she was sad about the whole situation, I did let her know that, the couple of things that she should think about. One is that her friend was sad, but she didn't. My daughter said like she made her cry. Her friend cry. I said you cannot make her cry because that's her own cravings. And the second thing is that you should not speak negatively about any person anytime. So is that a wise thing to do, or is that something that I was trying to push on?
Yeah, what you can do here, because your daughter is like 16 years old, I think, you can say to your daughter, you can say, Anushka, now that we're home and, it's nice and comfortable, relaxed here, I have some things that I'd like to share with you regarding what happened. Would you like to sit down and talk about this? Is this a good time? Right? Because as a parent, you're responsible to help this individual learn and grow and develop and cultivate wisdom. And you would like to create situations where you're still inviting them, even though you're responsible for their growth and development, and that's a role that you're taking on as their father. You would still like to kind of invite them into the conversation rather than just push them into it. Because or she might be thinking about some things, she might have some homework, she might be thinking about something else, and it's just not the right time. So you would like to be sure that her mind is actively ready to listen and be able to understand the teachings. So even though you're in this role that you have the responsibility to teach, you would still like to make sure her mind's turned on to be able to actively listen. And that's the way you can just invite her into a conversation rather than just push it on her at a time where you think that you'd like to talk about it.
Okay, she did seem interested in listening, and she did listen and actively, actually, even at that point, absorb the idea that she should not be talking negatively about other people, because there was another conversation with my wife, and there was something. Then she said, "I would not like to talk negatively about the friend at all." So I think she did understand what I shared with her, and actively she actually listened to it and actually tried to apply it as well. So it seemed maybe the way I did it seemed okay.
Yeah, sometimes it's a matter of taking something that's okay, and making it good, and then taking something that's good, making it great, taking something that's great, making it wonderful, outstanding, marvelous, right? So you'd like to just always be looking at how to make this better and better and better, because in that situation, it sounded like it worked out, but maybe in another situation, maybe not. So you would like to always be looking to invite them into a conversation. And with your daughter being 16, there's even ways for you to be able to kind of flip it around a little bit and say, Anushka, based on what just happened in the car, or what happened yesterday in the car, now that you've invited her into the conversation, right, and she's interested to talk, you can say, are there any things that you're seeing that you could have done better, right? Listen to them first. I like to do this with my son because it actually saves me time, that I don't have to sit there and teach him like 10 different points of things that he did that was unwise. If he sees 3, 4, or 5 of them himself, wonderful. We don't have to talk about those. He already sees them for himself. And then I know that he has that wisdom. We just need to talk about these 3, 4, or 5 that he didn't see, right? So this is like a great way to talk with children is, ask them about what it is that they saw that they could improve. And then that way, what they already know, and you're not rehashing things. And then also their mind in the unenlightened state, it's going to get bored if they're sitting there for 30 minutes or an hour hearing things that they already know. It's better to, kind of check in on that. And this is one of the ways that you can take something that's okay and make it even better and better and better. And then you can be more effective as a individual who's trying to help your children to grow.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just in class the way that I typically do, which is thank all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to grow and develop on the path to enlightenment. Next week, we're actually going to be starting our next book, which is the last book of the entire book series. It's volume 13. It's titled Generosity. This is where you're going to be able to learn all about the practice of generosity and how that's really important. It's really interesting that this book is the last book of the book series, because it's actually something that you need to be practicing all the way through your entire practice. That's why we talk about it all the way back in the foundational classes, but it's at the very end of the book series so that you can get the depth of understanding all the ins and outs of this. But you potentially have been practicing generosity all the way through as you've been growing and developing on the path. So we're going to be exploring that book. I think there's something like 80 some odd chapters in that book. So you're going to be learning all about generosity. So if you'd like to read the next 10 chapters, chapters 1 through 10, remember you can get this on our website. You can download it. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions on Amazon, or if you're here in Chiang Mai, you can get them at the temple by just reimbursing us for our printing cost. So thank you for joining. I appreciate your interest to learn and grow and develop on the path. Thank you for participating and reading and asking questions. Tomorrow in our group learning program, as you guys heard me share, we're going to be learning about this being of God, where you can actually learn how to get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being or without a relationship with this being. This being doesn't determine whether you get to enlightenment or not. So you might decide to have a relationship with this being or not, and you can get to enlightenment either way. But there's probably a bunch of things that you've learned about this being that is potentially hindering you from having a healthy relationship, if that's something that you even remotely aspire to experience. So I'm going to help you to be able to understand those things so that you can eliminate that type of conditioning in your mind, and you can get to a point where you independently verify the truth about this particular being. And then on Sunday evenings here in Chiang Mai, I'm doing the meditation in the main hall. So for some of you guys, that might be Sunday morning. You're always welcome to be able to join that as well. And then there's the group learning program at 9 p.m. Sunday night here, which is oftentimes Sunday morning, depending on where you are in the world. And all next week, I've got a Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment course that I teach every single month that is going to be happening. So you guys are welcome to either attend that or learn in the recordings as well. So have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Take care and be well. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.